Everybody please rise. We'll now salute the flag. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty, justice for all. Thank you. Roll call.
Mr. Dakota?
Here.
Ms. Doherty?
Here.
Mr. Hoey?
Here.
Mr. Lay?
Here.
Ms. Martin?
Here.
Mr. Nutter?
Here.
Mayor Samaras?
Here.
7 present.
Thank you. The first order of business tonight is the appointment of Director of Special Education, Michael Lovetto. Mr. Superintendent.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm honored today to provide to you a recommendation for our Director of Special Education position that has been vacant since July 1. This position will report through our Office of Teaching and Learning and will report directly to our Chief Academic Officer, Robin Desmond. She will share with you a brief bio on Mr. Lovato. He is also here in the audience tonight.
Thank you, Superintendent Boyd. Michael Lovato has over 17 years of educational experience. He has served as special education behavior teacher support, special education support staff member, assistant principal, director of curriculum, special education director, state special education director, and superintendent of schools. Mr. Lovato began his professional career as a behavior support teacher with the Santa Fe Public Schools, serving students identified as in need of special education support. He was promoted within the special education department, where he served as special education program specialist, providing direct support to teachers and administrators with the implementation of special education services for students placed in behavior support rooms, to include the detention center and alternative placements. Mr. Lovato began his administrative career as an assistant principal, where he led the special education department successfully to achieve overall academic gains, increased graduation rates, and reduced discipline. Mr. Lovato's experience includes serving as the New Mexico State Director of Special Education and most recently the Cuesta Independent School Superintendent. Mr. Lovato has been a key contributor in the development of alternative schools and leading change as an administrator to improve the overall quality of the district. Mr. Lovato believes that every student can succeed and that all staff have a responsibility to provide an adequate education to every student. He believes in building relationships with all stakeholders in order to promote positive environments conducive to learning.
Thank you. It's an honor to recommend to you approval of the appointment of Mr. Lovato to the position of Special Education Director for Lowell Public Schools.
Any discussion before I ask for a roll call? Mr. Lay?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just curious, is this one of the positions that needs school committee votes? It is, yeah.
Yes.
Okay. I just want us to say that the bio is terrific. When we talked at the executive session the last time, everything was perfect. I had no qualm in supporting it. This morning I had a pleasure to talk to Michael Lovato for about half an hour and learn something that he's a very strong guy, athletics and all that. One thing that I keep on walking out of the school department this morning, keep on thinking, was what the motivation for Mr. Lovato to leave Santa Fe, and that was about him, his family, that his daughter wanted to go to school around here. That's why he wanted to move. For me, with that, I'm not sure what school Mr. Lovato's daughter will be attending. So for me, I feel that if she ended up going to UMass Lowell, perfect. We will have Mr. Lovato here for at least 4 years. But if she ended up having a full ride to UPenn, we may see him start leaving next September. And that is a chance that we have to take if we decide to hire him right now. And he has a stable job and he doesn't really need to move at this moment. And for me, I feel that if I decide to have Mr. Lovato here in Lowell, we just don't know what will happen 9 months or 10 months from now. So because of that, I feel reluctant to appoint because I'm not sure unless if school committee don't need a vote, I would say, Dr. Boyd, he's all yours. But if you want me to vote, then I'm reluctant to vote because of that, unless Mr. Lovato could explain in that. Anyway, so that's my take on it. Thank you. Thank you.
Any other comments? Mr. Hoey?
Thank you. I didn't know if I was going to make any comments, but I sat with Michael myself for a good half hour, maybe 45 minutes. I've done a lot of research. I've talked to a lot of teachers that we have and speech pathologists and BCBAs, and I really went around and I got about 12 questions, and there's only 2, if you don't mind, Michael, I'd like you to answer 2 of them for the people on the mic, if you don't mind coming to the mic. And the first question I had would be, how would you, the director, support continuing education in a time of budget constraints? If you could touch that for a minute.
Yes, thank you for having me, school committee, and Dr. Boyd. The first thing that we have to do, and I understand your concerns as well too, sir. The first thing that I see that we have to do is we have to evaluate our current process. We have to evaluate our current IEPs, how we're allocating students, and then how are we evaluating the services that we're actually implementing. And I know that one of the questions that was continuously asked during my interview process was the amount of continuous supervision, the amount of placement in alternative programs, and how we're evaluating those programs. One of the things that I've seen with continuous supervision, for example, that's a big part of our budget, is we don't have exit plans for what these look like. We don't have exit plans for what alternative programs look like. We don't have goals for how we achieve behavior goals. And, we end up spending a lot. And that's not a good use of our funds. And so to answer your question in short, it'll be a constant evaluation of what we're assigning, a constant evaluation of what we're allocating, a constant evaluation of how we're using our resources. So, are we placing them in the correct place? Are we allocating correctly? Are we, supporting our teachers correctly? Are we bringing in outside resources for training when we have staff within the district that have the expertise? Are we utilizing them correctly? Every time we bring in somebody from outside, it costs additional funds. When, a district the size of Lowell, we have available, qualified, and professionals within our buildings that can provide the trainings if we support. One of the things that Lowell has as well too is we have 2 attorneys within staff. The majority of the training that we do with compliance, those 2 individuals are without a doubt qualified. And so, that's one of the first things that I would do is, how are we allocating these things? And there's multiple areas in any district, no matter the size, that we can look at the funds and how we're allocating, and there's multiple areas that there'll always be waste as well.
Thank you. Mayor, I just have one more quick question for Mike. Michael, I'm glad you're on me. That's what I was too, so that helps me when I go to vote for you tonight. But one more question. Tell me how you would handle a parent who is adamant that their child needs services when the team disagrees with them. And that would be like dealing with a person like me, like I'm a real squeaky wheel when I don't get my way. I'd like to hear how you might handle something like that. That's all I have. Thank you.
Well, school committee member, there's multiple ways. Special education isn't the only way that we could provide remediation or resource or, to help fight the achievement gap. 504 plans have much weight. A lot of the times our students will qualify for 504 plans when it's not necessarily a special education concern. That's one of the ways. Another way as well too is, special education I think that we can talk to the parents of why it's a positive thing their child didn't qualify as well. If we're not qualifying for special education services, there's, through our assessments and the evaluation, there was some positive in it. And so sometimes it's how we present as adults, how we present as educators to the parents to give them the information they need in order to understand why their kid is not going to get services through special education, but then also providing them the alternatives for what we do have within the schools. And there's a lot of alternatives that we can use where students can still get support as well, too. That's not based through an IEP.
Okay, at this point, I don't
Thank
want
you.
to turn this into an interview session because Mr. Lovato has been interviewed by the superintendent and his staff, and the superintendent has set up time for the members of the school committee to address him. But at the same time, what I want to do is just allow a couple of questions because it gives our audience a good idea who you are, and you handle yourself very well. So I'd like to have a roll call as to the acceptance of Mr. Lovato as Special Ed Director.
Mr. Dakota,
Is there a motion out there?
approve the appointment of Michael Lovato,
okay.
Director of Special Education.
Okay, I need a motion, yeah, I'm sorry. You-
Motion.
And a second, by Mr. Nutter.
Yes.
Ms. Doherty?
Yes.
Mr. Hoey?
Yes, and thank you for answering those questions.
Mr. Lay?
No.
Ms. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. Nutter?
Yes.
Mayor Samaras?
Yes,
6 yeas, 1 nay, approved.
congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Lovato, would you like to make any statement? You answered, but would you care to give a statement, or?
Yes, sir. School committee members, Dr. Boyd, thank you for the recommendation. I'm happy to be here. And so for anybody who has any doubts, I'll work with you. I'll take the criticism that's deserved. I'm open-minded for what's out there, and I look forward to working with the Lowell District, and I look forward to meeting the community and being educated by the community as well. So thank you, and I'm honored to be here.
Thank you. All right, next, I need a motion to accept and place on file the special minute meetings and the regular minute meetings of August 21st, 2019. I need a motion to accept by Mr. Nutter, second by Mr. Dakota. All in favor? Thank you. Then we have permission to enter. Mr. Superintendent?
Thank you. The recommendation is approval as written of all contracts under item 5.1.
Are there any questions? There was, no, an item was removed from permission to enter. Is there any questions? And I need a motion to approve by Mr. Dakota, second by Ms. Doherty. Roll call.
Mr. Dakota?
Yes.
Ms. Doherty?
Yes.
Mr. Hoey?
Yes,
Mr. Lay?
Yes.
Ms. Martin? Mr. Nutter?
Yes.
Mayor Samaras?
Yes.
7 yeas, approved.
Next, we have contract approval for the Director of Special Education. Mr. Hall?
Yes, Mayor. The one addition was that, consistent with the school committee's guidance over the last 2 years, was to put an explicit language saying that there was no right to sick leave buyback. So that was the only change from what you originally got.
Any further questions, Mr. Matter? All right, I need a motion to approve the contract by Mr. Dakota, second by Ms. Doherty. Roll call.
Mr. Dakota?
Yes.
Ms. Doherty?
Yes.
Mr. Hoey?
yes,
Mr. Lay?
Yes.
Ms. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. Nutter?
Yes.
Mayor Samaras?
Yes.
7 yeas, approved.
Next, we go into motions. First by Mr. Dakota. In light of recent events at Lowell High School, ask the superintendent to review all safety procedures at all of our schools. Principals should be asked if all of their outside doors are locked and are lockable. I need a motion to accept by Ms. Martin. Mr. Dakota?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think it's pretty self-explanatory. I think we need to make sure that our kids feel safe, that the parents feel that their children are safe in our buildings. With that little event that took place, I think it kind of puts us into that position where people will start to question that. And I don't think we shouldn't have that happening to us. We should be making sure, assuring our parents and our students that our buildings are in fact safe. So this is, I think, something that we need to make sure that it's happening.
Any further discussion? Thank you. Next is a motion by myself and Mr. Nutter, doesn't need an approval. Administration to review the JCA school assignment policy, provide recommendations, especially with regards to siblings and the importance of family, along with the students living within the school neighborhood street directory criteria. Mr. Nutter, you
I was going to defer and let you go first, Mr. Mayor.
want to? Refer to you. sir.
But thank you. You know, we've all heard stories. I've heard one recently about, you know, a parent who went down to the Family Resource Center. One parent works in Lawrence, another works in Boston. The grandfather, you know, has dialysis a couple days a week. He can't drive. The grandmother's 80 years old. The school is right one street over from where they live, and yet the student can't go to school there because there's no room. And even though they had these medical, you know, exceptions and valid reasons, they were told no is no, there's no exceptions, they'll be on the waiting list. We heard stories last week about a child who was in the 4th grade graduating from a school that is across the street from where they live. And the younger sibling was going into kindergarten and was told, you don't get sibling privileges because the older child won't be there next year, so it doesn't count. I just think we need to just review our policy. I know firsthand we had new people move into Lowell last year with 3 children, and each was originally assigned to a different school. Things like this shouldn't happen. We do have a policy that even though it's not a neighborhood school, we say we'll take into consideration your proximity to the school. And I know we have a voluntary desegregation program, but this city has been desegregated for a long time in most of our neighborhoods. We just need to remember the importance of family and keeping families, you know, together as much as possible. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you. Along with Mr. Nutter, if you'll allow me, Mr. Superintendent, you know, when you came into the school system, we're under a consent decree, and any major change in that consent decree really requires the assistance of the city solicitor's office and a lot of work by the school committee. But one of the major problems that has bothered me, and the problem I've been hit with the most, is families with 2 or 3 siblings, we'll say scheduled to, you know, all at an elementary age level, and they're put in 2 or 3 different schools. Now, I mean, most of our parents work, there's no question about that, and they rely on the school system in a sense to have a sense of order for them. And now, if they're going to live their lives, if they're going to work, if they're going to make sure that their children are cared for, the idea of putting them, say, because this is fact, 3 children in this, that could be eligible to go to the same elementary school in 3 different schools throughout the city with 3 different starting times, I think it's a nightmare. As a parent, I mean, I think I don't know what I would do to be heard. And so something has to be done, Mr. Superintendent, to ensure that the integrity of the family is kept together. And then as far as the consent decree itself, that's another problem to meet that. Any further discussion? Mr. Hoey?
Yeah, I really didn't want to comment on this, but I have to. One of the issues we've had over the past, let's say, 10 or 15 years with this issue is people getting taken care of. People jumping over other people on the list. I know it has happened. I don't want to belabor that right now and talk about it, but it has happened. And until we make sure that no one ever gets jumped over, we're going to have problems. We have to become a fair system, and I think we've improved in the past 3 years at the Family Resource Center, like I mentioned earlier. We're doing a fine job. We just got to make sure it doesn't happen to anybody. I ran into a problem last year that I had to go talk about it because people did jump someone over a list. But it was a human error, and I don't think it was someone that did it on purpose, but it does happen. And that's all I'm worried about, making sure it's just fair.
No, you're
Thank
correct.
you. That's all I have to say.
You're correct. I mean, there's no way I would advocate for anything that would allow list jumping. But the issue is, a family, the integrity of a family has to be maintained. I mean, that's not, I mean, you don't have to be a scientist to figure that out, okay? And as far as the consent decree, what I stated, Mr. Hoey, is that this school committee has to look at it with the city solicitor's office and everything, and any changes that would be made with the acceptance of this committee and the school administration to ensure that our children are receiving a quality education and they get fair treatment. But the thing is, right now, the issue of separating the family is not a fair thing in any way of looking at it. Ms. Martin?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I think as we go into this conversation, certainly it's wise to keep in mind the voluntary consent decree. I do think that desegregation is still a value in this community. And that, I think I know there are some specific issues brought forth by this motion, but I think even getting into this process requires us to look at it in a comprehensive way. So, and I think I'm certainly open to having the administration look through these policies and kind of come up with their best recommendations. The change in terms of sibling preference, that's a recent change. That's not something that was in place for decades. That's something that happened very recently. Previously, there was always sibling preference, so that you didn't have a family with 3 kids going to 3 different schools.
But we have it now.
But we have it now, yes. I'm just saying it wasn't part of the original consent decree, so it doesn't address the goals of the consent decree. It was something that was put in place, fairly recently. But I do think, taking the time to look at it, particularly in the context of the Parent Information Center and how we're building that so that we can, to Mr. Hoey's point, create a system that is absolutely fair, that is absolutely transparent, so that there aren't these instances, I'm certainly aware of them as well, of people who jump the line and were allowed to do so. So I think that, this is I think a very good opportunity for us to look at these two things in tandem and be able to strengthen both sides of that equation. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Thank you. Next, motion by Mr. Nutter and Mr. Dakota. Administration to explain the change in philosophy regarding class location for the Latin Lyceum and the Freshman Academy. Mr. Nutter or Mr. Dakota? You're first in the line, so.
I keep trying to defer to my elders,
Well, what?
It's just not working tonight.
I beg your pardon,
Oh, we're going to go there, Howie.
Mr. Dakota. We'll take care of that later.
Well, we both commiserated over this when we found out that Latin Lyceum has been moved over to the Freshman Academy. That made no sense to me whatsoever, having been at the high school for so long and how great the process was, the way it was before. I mean, I don't understand why the need had to, and honestly, I don't know how they can fit them into the Freshman Academy. That's got to be jam-packed with kids as it is. So I don't know how this came about, and we're just looking for clarification.
Mr. Nutter?
It's not the whole Lyceum. It's just some classes have been moved over there. And I'm also been told that some AP classes, English classes, have also been moved over there. And it was always my understanding that the Freshman Academy was to keep the freshmen together and have them, get acclimated. We know from the studies of the high school that we have much capacity in the main buildings. We know that capacity at the main buildings should not be an issue. I mean, it's one of the reasons we're going to be able to not need modular classrooms when we start the renovation project, is because we have some space. So I'm just looking to see why the change and the way parents, at least the few that have contacted us about this, they don't understand why the change was made, and they didn't know it until they got their schedules.
Mr. Dakota?
Yeah, I'm wondering if it has anything to do with the roof work that's being performed at the high school, and if that's affecting those rooms that are on that 3rd floor, And I'm assuming that that might be part of it, but I think we would like an explanation on that one. I think it's important. I think it's important that we maintain that freshman academy for freshmen. It's been a tremendously successful program that way. It's been proven year after year after year that our freshman class that comes into the high school, having had that transition year, is fabulous. Why are we going to try to play around with that process? I don't get it.
Mr. Hoey?
Thank you, Mayor. My granddaughter just graduated from the Latin Lyceum, and I'd like to make a comment about what I feel. I know there's a lot of girls that are high honors in the freshman academy, and they would love to be over at the main high school. When they're in the freshman academy, they feel like they're stuck there. They want out of there. And I'm talking about, like, my granddaughter was kind of low, I guess. I always thought you could only go to 4.0. She had a 4.2, and she was still one of the lower ones in Latin Lyceum, even though she's got a great scholarship at Lowell. But there was something going on between the freshmen that are basically, I'm not saying stuck in the freshman academy, but the Latin Lyceum could kind of strut saying we don't have to be in there. And that's how I take it a little bit. I think the move, maybe Ms. Desmond could make a comment about it, because your son was in the Latin Lyceum, right?
I mean, that's not the intent, but.
No, but I'm wondering.
I think at this point, no, we'd get into an entire discussion
Okay.
on it. So
Yeah.
let's get a report
Okay.
and go from there. Mr. Nutter?
Mayor, may I also suggest that we send this report to the high school subcommittee so that they can, I know they want to have a meeting and discuss some other issues too, so that might be a good
Form
thing.
of a motion, need a second?
Second.
Mr. Doherty. All right, thank you. Mr. Doherty, do you mind coming up to the podium? I have to take a call. Just.
Oh, I thought he wanted to speak. So on that last motion, all in favor? Aye, motion passes. So now we have registered speakers?
7.1.
For 7.1 site-based budgeting update. Would the speaker like to come forward? Connie Diamatopoulos.
Thank you for allowing me to speak. Hope I don't break down. Members, in October of 2018, I lost my granddaughter, Anna Eslanian. 2 weeks after the funeral, my daughter found a detailed letter on how severe the bullying, the threats, retaliation was. This is an epidemic. It affects all of us. As adults, you remember what it felt like to be bullied. Imagine a 15, 14, 12, an adolescent that doesn't have the coping skills. Why do I bring this up? On August 16th, I picked up the Lowell Sun, and I read about how the money is being allocated in Lowell to the public schools. And I understand all of this is needed, but I have to tell you, I'm sad and I'm disappointed because I don't feel that it's addressing enough of the support systems that we need to put in place for these kids. Kids need to feel safe going to school, and they don't. I attend support groups, I talk to parents, I talk to kids who aren't afraid to come forward, and the stories are horrific. We talk about state-of-the-art schools and computers and labs and gymnasiums. We need state-of-the-art kids. We need kids who are whole, not prepare them just for MCAS and going to college, but here. Kids need a safe haven. They need a place in the school where they can feel safe to go report bullying, whether it's a bully box or whatever. But we need an anti-bullying program, and it needs to start as young as 5. I have a friend whose 5-year-old daughter was shoved down a stairwell, ended up with a concussion and a broken arm. Turned out that the little girl who had been bullying her for months, and the parents had gone to the school and addressed it. Her parents are going through a horrible divorce. This little 5-year-old didn't know how to act out. So, yes, we need a place where the kids can go and feel safe to report bullying. We need programs. We need support systems for teachers. We need more social workers. We need more paras. We need help for teachers. We need more counselors. Again, no child should be afraid to go to school, and I hear these stories every day. Kids are afraid to go to school, and it's not the bullying we went through. It's scary, and social media doesn't help. So please, reconsider anti-bullying program, a place where these kids can go to school, and you have to send out the message that bullying will not be tolerated. It's nice to have signs that say bullying stops here. It hasn't worked. They need to know there's consequences and also need to know that they can get help. The kids who are bullied, in conclusion, need a safe place where they can go and report this. They need a support system. They need to feel safe. They need to know that there won't be retaliation like there is now, threats on social media. And the bullies need help too. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Stamatopoulos, for your comments. I think that bullying is certainly a concern that we all share. I don't know if anybody from the administration would like to comment at this time? No?
I'm available, and I believe my number was provided to the speaker for a direct conversation if she's interested. Thank you, Madam Committee Member.
Thank you. So we are now at the reports of the superintendent, site-based budgeting update.
Thank you. This is a continuation that you will receive, continuation of last meeting. You'll continue to receive until services are provided, as timeline suggests, at the end of this month. Dr. Guillory will provide you with this meeting's update on the site-based budgeting process.
Thank you, Mr. Superintendent, School Committee. This first slide is just a review of the process. You've seen this before. For the timeline piece, we have updated where we are now. Schools will be submitting their request to central office. Again, the idea here is looking at student need, what those student needs are, running the process to the school level based against the defined criteria, assigning the budget allocations out to the schools, the school site council, which includes school members, parents, make the determination or give their input in terms of the services or how they want to support those services. Central office will review and approve, provide feedback, and then the services provided to the students. Again, so this is just a diagram to show the flow from the identified student needs against the criteria that we've shared with you, the budget allocation all the way around, as Superintendent Boyd said, of services provided to students. And again, the idea is looking at the student need and the school community having input in terms of how we best service or support those needs. And what I provided for you in hard copy there on your table is a list of the allocations based against the defined criteria of special education supports and services, ELL supports and services, and then our schools that are presently in turnaround or working with the state, the unfunded mandates there. And again, the idea is that, of course, we would have loved to have been able to provide resources to all schools in this regard. But unfortunately, with our limited resource, we've made the best determination of how to allocate those resources, given the constraints there. I've been in many conversations with school leaders as well, so the idea is to engage in the thinking process. We could have very easily, from the central level, just assigned staff out, but the conversations that I've been having with principals at this point has been very powerful and shows that they are taking on this new process that, again, when you connect it to fair student funding, those processes through site-based budgeting. The idea is how do we make the determinations closest, those individuals that are closest to the students, to say this is the best way to provide the supports and resources to our students. And that concludes the presentation.
Ms. Martin?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Excuse me. Can you remind me, so when we had approved the budget changes a couple meetings ago, the total we were talking about for this site-based budgeting was 1 point something million?
Approximately 1.3.
1.3. And is that what's represented here?
That's what you have represented there is, I think, 1.25. We've also have aside for our translation services, because we know that's an important service and resource for our families as well.
So when we had that initial discussion, it was regarding the increased Chapter 70 funds, correct? That were coming into the district, and the 1.3 was what we were talking about. So if we're looking at these funds here, they are spread out over a couple different areas. Turnaround would not have been in part of Chapter 70, correct?
In terms of, you mean?
In terms of our total. If we had a total of an increase of Chapter 70, it would have been, I'm just trying to understand how this breaks down. It would have been the 1.3 that was allocated from that Chapter 70 increase to be put into the site-based budgeting. If what's totaling here is 1.25, I mean,
Right.
basically the same thing, but it's also including turnaround funds, which I don't believe were part of that Chapter 70 increase.
Those are not part of the turnaround grant funds. This is actually part of the criteria to how we meet student needs.
Okay.
So the criteria of turnaround was utilized as a proxy for additional student need. Essentially,
They
these
aren't
are
turnaround funds.
correct.
It's
Yes,
Chapter
there you
70.
go. Yes, thank you for the clarification.
Thank you. So, and that would be the same for the ELL, that's representing the larger populations within those school communities, and then the SPED. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
Further discussion? Ms. Doherty?
I just want to make sure I'm understanding this correctly. So it looks like most of these schools that are taking part of these school-based funding are choosing the ELL contingency. Does that mean they get an ELL teacher? What is that 96,000?
They could, and it actually, so thank you, that's a great question, because it allows me to also reference multiple questions before. They can choose with their school site council how they meet the multitude of needs within. It could be very true for a school that's identified as having overages for ELL, that they have a different solution in place for meeting an ELL need. These dollars would still be provided, and the school site council can say how best to meet the needs school-wide. The criteria here is how dollars were allocated, not necessarily how dollars are spent. You will get that back in a subsequent update. So, and I think it's also important to reference back. You remember the last update, you got kind of the menu of options. Now you have the revenue side. So here's the revenue side and the expense side. The next combination back to you is how did school site councils make decisions with both revenue and expenditure in front of them? We probably should have provided you that menu again within this update so you could see. You have
So
it. We do have that available for handouts if you're interested to see how one can connect to the other. A lot
So
of
did you-
hypotheticals.
So to just follow up on that, so these schools they've identified that they have some shortage of resources for their ELL students, their English language learners. And so this amount has been allocated for them to use that will benefit that population at their school, the ELL contingency, correct?
And more.
And more. Right, if they can come up with a way that benefits all students, the more the better. But the focus is meeting the needs of their English language learner students. So then my last question has to do with the high school, where you've got, the turnaround money is 63,000, and then the contingency piece is 192,000. That was based on the high school having this much larger need than all of the other elementary and middle schools, each individual, because of the population?
Yeah, if you look to, so for the viewing public who might not have a handout, there's, can you push back and see if maybe we can see it?
I think it's too small to
Yes,
read.
it is probably. So let me try to walk the viewing public through this. So you have the school name on the far left column. The next column is total enrollment. So you can see a little bit of proportionality when you look at the total enrollment And then across, then you see the criteria for allocation. And you can see with Lowell High School, significantly larger than any other school. So proportionally, they're going to have a larger dollar amount because of the student enrollment when you then factor in criteria. So if they didn't have any of the criteria, for instance, a turnaround, if they weren't in turnaround, there wouldn't have been any allocation. But now with criteria, then you got the proportion of student base, and the number is larger than, they have approximately a third of our total students at the high school.
Okay,
Not quite, but.
thank you.
Any further discussion on that matter? All right, next we have strategic planning update. Mr. Superintendent?
Thank you, and this comes back to, I think, in some elements of the conversation around motions. Ms. Phillips is going to load the slide deck and share with you. Sometimes it's necessary for us to go slow so that we can go fast. Strategic planning is a process that might kind of characterize that approach. We need to do this thoughtfully. We have some complex issues that we're facing. We have some needs within our community. It's an evolving community, an evolving school system, and there's a real need for us to engage the full community, all 69 diverse language communities within Lowell, and engage in a thoughtful process of strategic planning. This process and this will take us largely to the next budget cycle, which if we can do this well, we will be rolling into the next budget cycle with a clear plan in place so that the educational plan can drive our financial plan rather than the other way around. And this can be a multi-year plan that allows us to drive educational outcomes based on the demands of our larger community. So like the site-based budgeting, this will be a multi-phased update for the school committee. You should expect to receive an update on a monthly basis as to where we stand. If you recall the last budget adjustment, you allocated funds towards facilitation of this process. I'm going to hand the microphone over to our Chief Equity and Engagement Officer, Latifah Phillips, for a brief update on where we stand in the strategic planning process. Ms. Phillips?
Yes, thank you, school committee members, Mr. Superintendent. So I'm just going to take you high level through the planning. This is going to take at least 6 months, maybe 7. You will receive regular updates over the next couple months, but we're looking to kick off this process that will result in a plan, a living plan that will guide our work and our district improvement over the next couple of years. So we're looking to develop an actionable strategic plan to guide our future direction. With the new superintendent and the new team, we want to embark on a district-wide, community-led process, which is going to align our theory of action with our strategic goals, initiatives, and metrics for long-term improvement. In this process, we're looking to assess our strengths, our assets in the district, and prioritize our opportunities for improvement. So a little later in the presentation, we'll talk about what strategic planning is and what it's not, because it's easy to get really lost in all of the details and everything that we believe the plan could be. So again, this process is expected to take at least 6 months. All right, so what is the plan and what is it not? So it's a process, it's not an event. So it's going to be ongoing. The planning process is 6 months, but it's over the years, we'll keep revisiting. Are we meeting our metrics? Does anything need to change? It's going to establish our vision, mission, guiding principles, and our theory of action for increasing our performance, setting concrete, measurable goals. We want to be transparent. We want to demonstrate how we're improving and have all of our stakeholders on board with what the long-term vision of the district is. And the last bullet, it establishes accountability metrics for progress monitoring. So we'll be able to have discussions around the strategic goals we've set rather than just everyone's individual goals, wants, and desires. So it's not driven by one goal or singular idea. It's not a plan that's all things to all people. It's a plan that brings us together around what are our core goals and what are our core metrics for determining success of these goals. It's not going to include everything that we do. Just because you don't see it in the plan doesn't mean we're not doing it, but we have to think about what are those large buckets of work that we're going to focus on for the next couple of years. It shouldn't be full of jargon, you know, it should be accessible. Everyone should be able to read it and understand what are our goals, how are we going to get there, how are we going to measure success, and very importantly, it cannot sit on the shelf, right? So the success of the plan is not that we have a plan, but that the plan actually is actionable, that it's monitored. So some of the major steps. We're going to establish a steering committee to help guide us in this work. It will involve district-wide, community-wide outreach. That's including our employees, our teachers, our families, students, and our community partners. It'll include a review of data, reports, trends. So what are we already doing? What are we doing well? What do we want to continue doing? What are some new areas that we'd like to initiate? It'll be 3 to 5 years. You'll have regular input into this, eventually with it coming to you for full adoption. And then we'll have ongoing monitoring over the coming years. So we're looking to identify our strategic planning consultant this month, which was included in our budget from last month. And, you know, immediate next steps, conducting diagnostic analysis, current state of the district, and then determining the framework and major components of the plan. This will include, you know, as I mentioned, a broad community effort, getting input from communities that maybe historically have not been providing input into how we're serving our students and families. Then we'll transition into a writing period and adoption of the plan, hopefully in March, so that we can begin implementation in alignment with the budget into April. So of course, these are just high level, but each month we can come back and discuss the progress. And that concludes the high level overview of the coming month's planning.
Thank you, Ms. Phillips. If you can see here, I hope, and for, again, the viewing public, there's a through line here of the site-based budgeting, strategic planning, of engaging our community, of people who are closest to our children, our parents, our teachers, our school-based leaders, having involvement and a meaningful say in the direction of this school district. I believe site-based budgeting is a key aspect of it. The strategic plan will allow us to truly engage our families in a process of determining our goals over the next 3 to 5 years. Thank you, Ms. Phillips. School committee, we stand for questions.
Mr. Nutter?
As part of the diagnostic and analyzing, I believe last spring the state conducted a district-wide review. We should, I thought, be hearing back from them sometime this month. Do we have an update on that, and will that also be included in the plan for the strategic?
I'm looking forward to receiving that. We did check on the status of that recently. Once we receive it, we'll certainly forward that on to the school committee, and that would be included as part of the data for sure.
Any further discussion? Ms. Martin?
Thank you very much. I would just say, as you're kind of starting this process, I would recommend looking out in the community. I mean, for every nonprofit, every institution, they've gone through this process. So there's a lot of information that could save some legwork in terms of even just the demographics and some of the big picture metrics that we need to deal with here in the schools, but it's certainly not necessary for you to find that information out yourselves. So I think taking a look at some of the established strategic plans that are out there, I'd include the hospitals in that. You know, there are a number of different ones that have a great deal of information about the community that I think might give you a bit of a head start as you begin this process. Thank you.
Ms. Doherty?
Thank you. Just to quickly add to that, definitely the university and the community college, that would be another resource. And I guess my question is, have you thought about how to do this outreach? Like, you can have multiple approaches to community engagement, and what might those look like?
I think we could have a whole discussion on just the community engagement process itself, but I think one thing that might be familiar to the committee is I talked often about a strategic entry process to the superintendency and utilizing the first 100 days of the superintendency to really learn from and hear from the community. We've intertwined these two processes of strategic planning and the entry of this new administration to make sure that we're maximizing our time. What we've been able to do so far is hold several forums with different groups throughout the community. Different members of our community have been kind enough to reach out and offer to host forums. We also will be running breakfast conversations at individual schools, which we will get going, as well as evening forums once the school year really gets into rhythm here. This is kind of, these couple of weeks are starting up 1 through 12 last week and pre-K, K this week. So once our schools get into rhythm, you'll start to see a lot of that type of engagement coming from my office directly, and then we will be branching out from there and making sure that we can connect. But I would invite anyone within the community, those individuals in the community that raise their hand and have offered to host forums, meet and greets. I've been really just humbled by the turnout at these. Councilor Noon was the most recent to reach out and offer to host a meet and greet. Committee member Lay came to that meet and greet. Thank you for coming. And that was it was a great conversation. And that was actually Committee member Lay and Councilor Noon put that together for us. So anybody who's interested, please reach out to Ms. Phillips. Those have been great opportunities. The more people we meet with, they have more people to meet with, and it becomes just a real network of Lowell that I get a chance to hear from, listen to, and learn from.
Excellent.
All set. Next, we have report on motions.
The report is in your packet. We're here for questions.
Sonata?
Thank you. I've already highlighted we have some policy material to look at. One of the policies that I did not include originally that has since become very evident this week is as it adheres to the existing policy we have regarding staff conduct. One of our policies under staff conduct is in the area of personal conduct, the committee expects that teachers and others will conduct themselves in a manner that not only reflects credit to the school system, but also sets forth a model worthy of emulation by students. I find it ironic that we have a student handbook that we hand out to our middle school students and our elementary school students that under social responsibilities talks about good citizenship and a student's responsibility to respect authority, understand and adhere to school rules, be fully responsible for their own actions and consequences of those actions, respect the rights and belief of others, and respect and obey the federal, state, and local laws. And yet, we have nothing in our policy manual or in our contract with the UTL that allows us to take action against anyone of our staff who violates any of these things. And what was interesting when I was going through our staff conduct policy, it refers to Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 71, Section 37H, which says the superintendent of every school district shall publish the district's policies pertaining to the conduct of teachers and students. And said policies, you know, it goes on to name a lot of them dealing with students. And this is my first term here. I have seen we have got handbook revisions done each of the 2 years I've been here, but I've yet to see a policy guide for our staff. And, you know, I'm sure I'm not the only one who has received comments about what are we doing? Well, the fact is, we're in position to do nothing at the moment, and we can't leave, in my opinion, cases to be handled on a individual case-by-case basis, because to me, that's not something that works for everyone. So I think when we start looking at policies and we look at staff conduct, I would urge the administration to work with the law office and the UTL. And let's get some, if you do this, you are subject to this, and let's get it written out clearly in black and white, so there's no more guesswork, and we don't have to say to people, well, I understand your point of view, but there is nothing in writing that allows us to do anything. We need to, in my opinion, address this issue. Thank you.
Any further discussion on motions? Next, we have enrollment figures, Mr. Superintendent.
It's within your packet.
Any issues? I need a motion to accept this, the report of the superintendent 7.1 through 7.4 as a report of progress. By Ms. Doherty, second by Mr. Dakota. All in favor? Aye. Thank you. Home education, I need a motion to approve. By Ms. Doherty, second by Mr. Hoey. Roll call.
Mr. Dakota?
Yes.
Ms. Doherty?
Yes.
Mr. Hoey?
Yes.
Mr. Lay?
Yes.
Ms. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. Mineta?
Yes.
Mayor Samaras?
Yes.
7 yeas, approved.
Next, under new business, approval of revision of the 2019-2020 school calendar. Mr. Superintendent, do you want to?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I will kindly pass the microphone directly back to you or to Mr. Hall. This relates to the upcoming elections and modifying our calendar to allow for a recess of school session for the upcoming elections. This is their standing practice in the school district. We tend to close school on election days. It is the recommendation of our city officials. We agree with that recommendation, and we are bringing forward this motion based on the election calendar. I will pass it back to the mayor, who has, for any further history of this, but my recommendation is approval as written.
But Mr. Hall, you had a discussion with the city attorney, one of the attorneys. Do you want to go into that, just to give?
I didn't have a discussion with the mayor, but Minerva called over to the election office, and she reported it was a recommendation that schools should be closed.
Okay. Yes.
In the past, when I was on the election commission, one of the things that came up was closing school on preliminary election day, because it is very disruptive for the students and for the people who go to vote, because if you go to vote when the school is open, up where I vote at the Robinson, you're in the library, but on election day, you're in the cafeteria. So, and having people in and out of the schools without Corey checks and all, so the recommendation has been to close school on preliminary. So I would make a motion to approve this
And second by
recommendation.
Ms. Doherty. Yeah, I think this is important because the election office, one thing they discuss, their issue is safety. In light of what happened, school wasn't even in session when we had a certain problem. But the thing is, we do not want to expose our children, to any type of danger that's out there. And when you have so many people in and out of the schools and, all the doors open, it just doesn't work. So, do we have a roll call on this?
Mr. Dakota?
Yes.
Ms. Doherty?
Yes.
Mr. Hoey?
Yes.
Mr. Lay?
Yes.
Ms. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. Nutter?
Yes.
Mayor Samaras?
Yes.
7 yeas, approved.
All right, next, approval UMass Lowell research proposal document, Mr. Superintendent.
Thank you. If we can take 8.2 and 8.3 together, this is just in accordance with school committee policy for these to be brought to you. This is standard research that's conducted in the district from time to time. One of them happens to be one of our principals who's here in the audience, so I want to congratulate Principal Passeri on getting to this point within your degree work. It's fun work, and you'll enjoy being called doctor when you get done. I recommend approval of both 8.2 and 8.3.
I need a motion for approval by Mr. Nutter, second by Mr. Lay. Roll call.
Mr. Dakota?
Yes.
Ms. Doherty?
Yes.
Mr. Hoey?
Yes.
Mr. Lay?
Yes.
Ms. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. Nutter?
Yes.
Mayor Samaras?
Yes.
7 yeas approved.
And finally, 8.4, policy change recommendations, emergency procedures, file EBCD. Mr. Superintendent?
Thank you, Mr. Hull.
This formalizes the practice, so in gist, if the school opening is delayed 2 hours, it creates a transportation problem where the buses can't cycle back in time to address the pre-K PM session. You would need, according to Mr. Dakota, an extra 8 to 10 buses, and the companies just don't have the drivers or the extra inventory to be able to accommodate this.
Mr. Lay, Ms. Doherty?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just have a question. If that happen only in the morning, for example, is the afternoon class of transportation also affected?
Yeah, so it's my understanding, Mr. Lay, that some schools start at 9 o'clock, for example, and if there's a 2-hour delay, that pushes it to 11. And then once you conduct the pre-K and then attempt to bus those children home, it cuts into the busing of the pre-K in the afternoon, and it's physically impossible to use the same amount of buses. You'd have to find 8 to 10 more buses and 8 to 10 more drivers on a one-day notice, which the companies are unable to accommodate.
All set? Ms. Doherty?
Thank you, Your Honor. Just a quick comment. So I know in prior administrations years ago, we were very reluctant to do delay school starts because attendance data showed that you had a huge number of kids who just didn't show up, and it was a lost day of learning for many of our teachers. If you've got half the class out, you're going to redo those lessons the next day. So I mean, I'm fine with this recommended change. I would just like to make the comment that perhaps if the weather is that dicey, to just take a school day, take a snow day, and because then you get that day, you make it up later, though it's after MCAS usually. But I remember seeing some very compelling data about that years ago, and thinking that it did, have a certain amount of sense that it makes if you've got half the kids out. Not much learning, you're repeating the lesson the next day. Thanks.
Any further discussion? Okay. Any motion to approve change by Mr. Dakota, second by Mr. Lay. Roll call.
Mr. Dakota?
Yes.
Ms. Doherty?
Yes.
Mr. Hoey?
Yes.
Mr. Lay?
Yes.
Ms. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. Nutter?
Yes.
Mayor Samaras?
Yes.
7 yeas approved.
Motion to adjourn? Mr. Nutter, second by Mr. Dakota. Thank you.